Sean Tyndall, the Commissioner of the Department of Public Safety, has been in contact with those individuals. Obviously, the autopsy was done by the State Medical Examiner's Office at the Department of Public Safety. I personally know Sheriff John Ledbetter from Jackson County very well. I have not personally spoken to him. I have full confidence that he is going to do his job. And what I will simply say is I don't know all of the details. I don't know all of the facts surrounding the case. I have yet to see a fact or a piece of evidence that suggests any foul play. But if there is, I feel confident that the Sheriff's Office, the District Attorney's Office, the members at the Department of Public Safety that deal with these crimes, if there had been one, they will find it and they will do what is necessary.
Happy Monday, happy Monday, happy Monday. Welcome back to On the Shoulders of Giants. I am Joseph Ward, and as you know, on these Mondays, I continue my reading of Dr. Amos Wilson's great book, Blueprint for Black Power. And this Monday, we're covering Chapter 13, the financial corporate elite, the New World Government. But we're going to look at this from a more relevant lens. And as you know, you've been keeping up with this channel. We've been following the Nolan Wells case. And I thought the Nolan Wells case overall is great to help get Dr. Wilson's point across for Chapter 13. How economics are used to influence politics, policy, people, the government, the infrastructure that controls the area or the whole country. But we're gonna look at it from a more micro view, looking at Ocean Springs, Mississippi. And that's why I opened up this video with the governor of Ocean Springs, Mississippi, giving his take on the Nolan Wells case. And so from the beginning, especially when Judge Ashley Cole jumped out, my mindset went to, okay, you got Sheriff Ledbetter, Ashley Cole, and others who later came out. And so the people who are in positions of power, in authoritative positions, who are controlled and influenced by those with money, and they could be those with money as well. But from what I'm gathering from the information from this case is systematic racism is at work. It is at work, and it goes well with this because Wilson argues that political power does not operate independently from economic power. So they're using the economic power, the political power, their racist ideologies, all that to make sure that they can cover up this case as long as possible. Instead, he contends that the modern world is increasingly shaped by a relatively small network of large financial institutions, multinational corporations, investment interests, and political actors whose influence extends across national boundaries. Now think about that. And so Dr. Wilson is talking from a national level, but think about that from a local level, how a city government is ran as well, right? The central question is who actually, and think about this from a local government standpoint. Who has the power to influence governments, economics, education, media, and culture? Wilson's answer is that economic organization, not merely elected government, is one of the primary drivers of long-term power. All right, so if you have not already, please go ahead and hit that like button, comment, make sure you jump in these comments, hype this video, share this video. And if you have not already, I don't know what you're waiting on, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. If this is your first time viewing this channel, thank you, and welcome, because we got some good information over here. So how we're going to do this is we're going to first jump into the reading of the book. And then I have a video on the racist systematic history of Mississippi. So we can have a historical reminder of how Mississippi get down. And I want to kind of further one of my points from the live we had on Wednesday when I had pushback that Nolan Wells' parents didn't fail him by not teaching him about racism. My thing is they were so entrenched. They're so entrenched in that Ocean Springs community that they thought racism didn't affect them. They thought they was different. But I have another video of a gentleman who claims to be an Ocean Springs resident, and you're going to hear how he's talking so you can see the mindset that I'm talking about. But so we're starting off chapter 13, Blueprint for Black Power. Let's get into this reading. And chapter 13, can I find it? Hold on, let me find it. This is 12. Chapter 13 starts on page. Once I find it, shoot. I thought I had it. All right, here we go. I'm tripping. All right, so chapter 13 starts on page 295. And the title, once again, the title of this chapter is The Financial Corporate Elite, the New World Government. And think about it from this standpoint. The financial corporate elite, the Mississippi or Ocean Springs, Mississippi government. World ascendancy of private capital. And once again, think about this. Listen to it from the national level, but think about it on a local level. Not only Ocean Springs, but how your city is ran. Ownership is sovereignty. The owners of the means of production, in effect, dominate those people who depend on them for survival and for maintaining and enhancing their quality of life. The capitalist societies, national and multinational corporate hegemonies, and their satellites markedly influence the quality, rhythms, order, and direction of people's lives. Their self-perception, their name of their social interactions, their values, taste, and desires more directly than do their governmental, cultural, and religious institutions. In the face of the organized national and transnational corporate elite, the owners of the means of production, the citizens of supposedly independent nations lose control over their lives. The masses rapidly lose their power to determine their collective fate directly and indirectly through their elected delegates and the heads of state to the owners of the vital financial and business capital, to large local, regional, and national and multinational corporations, and to powerful governmental, quasi, and non-governmental agencies who represents the interests of the owners of the means of production instead of the people. Therefore, the organized business ownership community, the owners of the managers of financial capital, and the owners and managers of the corporations are self-selected governors who, going beyond certain limits, may usurp the power of representative governments, thereby undermining the power of the people to elect governments which serve their interests before all others, including those of the financial corporate elite. When the national government's ability to control the national economy and budget is superseded by the international trade agreements such as GATT and NAFTA, their indebtedness or their dependency on international financiers, large foreign national banks, the World Bank, and International Monetary Fund, various foreign aid arrangements, and the like, all extensions of or related to of private financial capital, then their national sovereignty or self-determination is essentially an institutional fiction. This is the case with virtually all of the continental African and African diasporian nations today, and an increasing number of nations of all stripes, white, Asian, and Semitic. For example, on June 20th, 1994, the New York Times reported that through its structural adjustment programs, LMF and the World Bank now effectively oversee and supervise the economics of some 30 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Indebted nations are indebted to the owners and managers of public and private financial capital and to the nations and international agencies who represent them and enforce their contracts. Consequently, these private international financiers, financial institutions, multinational corporations, and multinational government agencies, in conjunction with the hegemonic nations whose domestic and international policies they effectively influence, dictate the economic, social, and political fate of weaker nations against the wills and the best interests of their peoples. Increasingly, private financial capital is able to achieve these ends under its own power. Felix Royhan, investment banker and former chairman of the Municipal Assistance Corporation for the city of New York, the famous Big Mac, which took control of the city's budget during its financial crisis under the Beam administration, noted this trend. For the last 50 years, the Bretton Woods institutions, the World Bank, and the IMF have directly involved in financial economic development in the emerging economies. The role will more and more be taken over by the global capital markets. The cold-blooded selection process by which the world capital is invested will determine the economic progress of many developing countries. Today, the international supremacy or financial capital and global corporate elite is almost complete. Together, they are colluding to form a new world order, a new world government to which all nations will give prostrated obedience. The fledgling financial corporate world government will not be democratically representative of those it shall govern. Though it tends to rule all nations and peoples, it is intended to be a world government dominated primarily by the United States or white America, the European Economic Community, and secondarily by Japan, China, and one or two Southeastern Asian nations. The head of the world government is expected to be a white American financial corporate elite disguised as the democratically elected government of the United States. Its power to rule will be ideologically justified and legitimated in terms of the national ascendance of private property, private enterprise, privatization, and free market, and U.S. military supremacy, right? And remember, once again, in the book, he's talking about a national and international level. So if that's happening on a national and international level, it's happening on local levels. And remember, he said it affects how those that they control, it affects how they think and how they see the world and how they behave. So check this video out.
Here's a lot of things that the people in the back of the room don't know. Yes, us locals, we are privy to a lot of things because we know these people. I gave Nolan his first haircut. I know his parents. Been knowing him for years. Been knowing his mom since she was like in high school. I'm real good friends with her family. So here's the deal. When that video came out, and you hear them people on there talking that lady dug up and went and researched and brought up the sounds. The truth is this: if that video is legit, it's a few people in trouble. Point blank, period. Point blank, period. Now see, this is the stuff that you gotta wait for. This type of evidence, right? Now, I'm gonna help you out here. Alright? I hear Bart and them parents are suing. Bart's name was mentioned on the video.
Now listen to this.
Okay. Well, I asked one of his friends, who was a black guy, about Bart a few days ago. And they said that Bart was cleared already. And according to the black people, they cleared Bart. I don't even know if the police cleared Bart. But it sounds like the black people that's involved cleared Bart. They said Bart ain't had nothing to do with it. But Bart's name is all over that tape. But if these black guys are telling the truth, then guess what? You see why his daddy's suing. And that's what I'm saying, people. You can't just be so quick to just do this type stuff, man. This stuff take time, bro. Investigation. I'm gonna tell you something, man. By the time it's all said and done, half of Ocean Springs might be going to prison, or half of Ocean Springs might be going on a vacation. You don't know yet. So just chill. And like I said, I know these people. I know they family. Alright? We all been knowing each other. So ain't nobody on here taking up for nobody. I'm not looking out. I'm not looking out for nobody on here. I'm only speaking what I think is best to be spoken to keep the peace until the facts come out.
It's too late to keep the peace, but that's the mindset that I was talking about. So you think people with that mindset would teach Nolan Wells that white people to not be in a secluded place with a whole bunch of white people by themselves? Y'all really believe people with that mindset would teach Nolan Wells something different? So you mean tell me they don't believe that they're entrenched in this community? The way this community is ran, the way this community is set up is the same way that Dr. Amos Wilson is describing in this chapter. He's just talking about, we're just looking at this from a local level while he's talking about a national and international level. So he talked to one black guy, and that one black guy cleared Bart, so that means Bart is good. And he's talking about keeping the peace. It's too late to keep the peace. Somebody's dead, but they're afraid. They understand that the system that works in Ocean Springs, Mississippi is more powerful than anything that they have. And all of those black people are in line. How the hell does black folk who were not there, how can they clear Bart? How can they clear Bart when they wasn't there? How do they know the facts when they weren't there? So we're supposed to believe the one black guy that's Bart's friend who said he cleared Bart. So because he cleared Bart, everything is cool. All right, but y'all telling me these people are supposed to really realize what the system of white supremacy and racism really is when they think like that. All right. So the next part is page 297. The private financial corporate complex, U.S. second government. The fact that a private financial corporate complex and its government and its governing elite are the second government of the United States. Let me read that again. The fact that the private financial corporate complex and its governing elite are the second government of the United States. And just think about that from a local level. It's evident to all who care to analyze the fundamental social structure of American economic and political power. That is, the elected U.S. government may for all political purposes be perceived as an extension of this private government. Its primary function under such circumstances is to legitimate and execute private rule by making it appear to be public policy. This is the fascist corporate state produced wearing a benign public persona. By the private financial corporate complex, we mean that combination of the largest, wealthiest, and most influential financiers and privately owned financial institutions, syndicates, and corporate bodies, which seek by various methods to influence and direct governmental policy in favor of their own self-serving interests, and often against the best interests of the public. One of the more important means by which the complex influences governmental policy is in favor through the appointment of some of the most politicized members to head powerful governmental departments, officers, and agencies. Parentine notes this in this contention. The top state and federal officers and party leadership positions to this day have remained largely in the hands of white, Protestant, middle-aged, upper-income males of conventional political opinion, drawn from the top ranks of corporate managed from the prominent law and banking firms of Wall Street, and less frequently from the elite universities, foundations, and scientific establishments. Note, every member of the ruling class is born rich, but not every member of the ruling class is born rich, but most are. Not all wealthy persons are engaged in ruling. Some prefer to concentrate on making money or living a life of ease. The ruling class contains what could be called the politicized members of the upper class, writes Alan Wolf. The policies they pursue in office frequently are connected directly to the corporate interests they represent in their private lives. Thus, the decision makers involved in the U.S. armed intervention against the worker student uprising in the Dominican Republic in 1965 consisted of Abe Fortas, A.A. Burrow Jr., Ellsworth Bunker, Averill Harriman, and a half dozen others who were stockholders, directors, or counselors, or large sugar companies that depend on Dominican sugar and molasses for their operations. Even without these direct economic interests, it would be difficult for these gentlemen in their neutral decision-making roles to escape the assumptions, inclinations, and priorities inculcated by their economic and social milieu, because they have their own agenda, and they use their power and influence and their money to push their own agenda, right? The nation state is no longer the sole center of power, right? Wilson argues that many people believe governments are the highest authority. So I just want us to understand, like, these governments are being controlled by the people who have the money and the power and the influence, right? Instead, he suggests that governments often operate within broader economic systems influenced by multinational corporations or local corporations, international financial institutions or local financial institutions, global investment networks or local investment networks, local banking systems, and transnational economic interests or local economic interests. His point is not that governments have no power, but that economic actors can significantly shape power through investment, lending, lobbying, trade, and capital flows. The people who have the money and the power get to influence and dictate what happens within your area, my area, and all these areas, and nationally on a daily basis. Wealth concentration creates power concentration. Remember that. Wealth concentration creates power concentration. And Dr. Wilson argues that wealth naturally concentrates unless there are forces that redistribute opportunity for competition. And we know that's not happening. As wealth becomes concentrated, so does influence over banking, finance, technology, manufacturing, communications, education, media, politics, and we can say law. And the law. His concern is less about individual wealth and more about institutional concentration of wealth and power. And that's how we get to a massive cover-up. Like the dude said in the video, one thing I did agree that dude said in that video, the black dude, half of Ocean Springs could be in jail. But will they if they actually have the power? The Federal Reserve, private controller of the public economy. The tyranny of the private financial corporate complex over the quality of American life can be no better illustrated than by observing the immense influence exercised over the national economy by private financial corporate capital in the form of the Federal Reserve System. The Federal Reserve is described as an efficient monetary mechanism which functions to foster a flow of money and credit that will facilitate orderly economic growth, a stable dollar, and long-run balance in our international payments. Hellbronner and Thoreau described the Federal Reserve thusly. For many years, the banks themselves decided what reserve ratio constituted a safe proportion of currency to hold against their demand deposits. Today, however, most large banks and members of the Federal Reserve, a central banking system established in 1913 to strengthen the banking activities of the nation. Under the Federal Reserve System, the nation is divided into 12 districts, each with a Federal Reserve Bank owned by the member banks and the district. In turn, the 12 reserve banks are themselves coordinated by a 7-member Federal Reserve Board in Washington. Since the president, with the advice and consent of the Senate, appoints members of the board to the 14-year terms, they constitute a body that has been purposely established as an independent monetary authority. The Federal Reserve is essentially a central bank, and like all central banks, it seeks to exert control over the direction and extent of changes in the money supply. Like all central banks, it seeks to supply the national economy with the right amount of money through inflation or deflating the money supply by manipulating bank reserves, interest rates, and buying and selling of U.S. government bonds on the open market. Despite the fact that it may, independent of government interference, have a major impact on the national economy and for better or worse on the lives of American citizens, the Federal Reserve is not a public governmental agency. It is not democratically controlled by the people whose lives it is of critical importance, for it is an independent private organization owned by its member banks, and like any other privately owned or operated institutions, its employees are not civil servants. Referring to this privately owned system, which controls the nation's issue of money and controls its financial resources, Wright Patman, former chairman of the House Banking and Currency Committee, is reported to have said, in the United States today, we have in effect two governments. We have an independent, uncontrolled, and uncoordinated government in the Federal Reserve System, operating the money powers which are reserved to Congress by the Constitution. Power and control. They're going to do anything to stay in control, to be in control, to make sure that the nation is ran the way they want it to. Like, they keep people in check. You know, like when PC was saying the other night, we're at war. We are at war, but we have to understand that we're at war. And I'm gonna be real. I don't want to go to war with nobody who don't know they're at war. Stay from around me. If you don't know we're at war, if you don't know what's going on around, stay from around me. I don't want you in this fight because you're gonna get everybody hurt. So, tyranny of the free market. Thus, we can surmise from our foregoing discussion that relative to the most vital areas of life, the making of a living through stable employment and the maintenance of a viable national economy, the social and economic fate of Americans rests in private hands and reflects predominantly the policies of a private government, the government of the white male financial corporate elite. That's this barely visible government not only rules in the shadows of the public government, but more perniciously rules in the name of the free market, of free trade. Two phrases most American citizens think are synonymous with individual freedom, freedom of choice, and democracy. However, free market and free trade economies may operationally represent political, social, and economic tyranny, as well as provide the foundations for class and racial domination. The free market or the open market is ultimately owned by those who buy and sell within it. The market consists of human beings engaged in the varied activities of buying and selling priorities, commodities, futures, and the swapping of options. The market is human activity and is therefore biased by human attitudes and values. The nature and effects of markets on the lives of ordinary citizens are determined by the marketing activities of their biggest and most influential buyers and sellers, brokers and dealers. And when those buyers and sellers, brokers and dealers who dominate the markets belong primarily to one class or two races, free markets are not free and open markets are closed. The oligopolistic character of the contemporary free market clearly corroborates John Kenneth Galbraith's contention in that the primary objective of the modern giant corporation is to avoid the unpredictability, instability, and riskiness of the marketplace free for all. The corporate elite's drive to maintain marketplace predictability, stability, to avoid or minimize marketplace risk has led to the situation as described by Greenberg. And this is what Greenberg is describing. Giant corporations have amassed sufficient power to allow them in general to tame and transcend dealings in the marketplace. Instead of the market system envisioned by Adam Smith, a system characterized by vigorous competition between many small firms, a new system has emerged on the American scene. One of the economists termed oligopoly. The oligopoly leads to private control of prices and profits, and thus wide direction in the decision-making power of corporate executives. Oligopolistic power means that a few firms are able to control the market, to deny entry to new firms, to control sources of raw materials, and to generate their own international sources of capital for investment and expansion. Control, private control, being able to put themselves in control of all of these different organizations. Like I showed you last Monday with BlackRock. BlackRock controls everything. I'm talking everything. So let me read this. Policy of deterrence. The classified document The classified document makes the case for a world dominated by one superpower whose position can be perpetuated by constructive behavior and sufficient military might to deter any nation or group of nations from challenging American primacy. To perpetuate this role, the United States most efficiently account for the interest and the advancement in industrial nations to discharge them from challenging our leadership or seeking to overturn the established political and economic order. The document states, which its focus is the concept of benevolent domination by one power. The Pentagon documented articulates the clearest rejection to date of collective internationalism, the strategy that emerged from World War II, when 5 vicious powers sought to form a United Nations that could mediate disputes and policies, outbreaks, and violence. So that's the end of that. All right, so let me go ahead and knock out this last piece, then we go ahead and move on. Regional threats and risk. With the demise of global military threats to U.S. interests, regional military threats, including possible conflicts arising in and from the territory of the former Soviet Union, will be of primary concern to the U.S. in the future. These threats are likely to arise in regions critical to the Secretary of the United States and its allies, including Europe, East Asia, the Middle East, and Southwest Asia, and the territory of the former Soviet Union. We also have important interests at stake in Latin America, Oceania, and Sub-Saharan Africa. In both cases, the U.S. will be concerned with preventing the domination of key regions by a hostile power. Pax Americana and Pan-African prosperity. The Pax Americana, on which world capitalism and free enterprise presumably depends, according to the Pentagon draft, obviously requires United States, the white American financial corporate elite, global political, economic, and military hegemony. As the draft recognizes, such hegemony can only be challenged by national, regional, or collective blocks of people determined to maintain their relative autonomy and ability to be the prime beneficiaries of their own human and material resources. If African nations and people are to be salvaged from the impoverished third world economy under the aegis of the United States economic and military hegemony, then it is vitally necessary for the African American nation to be deeply and inextricably intertwined in the American industrial military complex. Because it got to stop being scary. This means that the African American community must deeply penetrate and co-own the mainstream American financial corporate sector, and through its influence on American foreign policy, move to direct that policy in ways favorably to the security and prosperity of all African nations and people. It also means that African nations and peoples, including the African American community, must with urgent care develop a global corporate system in order to counterbalance white American, European, and Asian systems, which are now taking exploitative advantage of the currently weak and disorganized state of these same nations and people. The power of national and transnational corporations must be counterbalanced by organized national and transnational consumer unions, which will refuse to support the corporations and corporate companies which operate against their socio-cultural and political economic interests. In their counteractions against hegemonic financial corporate capital, organized consumers must be joined by national and international organized labor, which refuses to accept wage slavery and peonage as conditions for being employed by piggish transnational corporations. Only strategically passive and active resistance on the part of the organized masses the world over can overcome the tyranny of the international financial corporate elite, if it is their will to do so. And that is the end of chapter 13, which ends on page 306. All right. So thinking about all of that leads to the corporate influence of policy, right? Because Wilson argues that corporations do not simply sell products. They sell influence, right? They also influence legislation. But they do sell influence, but they influence legislation, like we're talking about. Thinking about it from a local level, and from a state level too, because we saw the governor of Mississippi speaking about this case, saying he's good friends with Sheriff Ledbetter down in Ocean Springs. So the governor of Mississippi. So legislation, public opinion, lobbying, campaign financing, educational priorities, research funding, international trade, right? All of that on international levels and local levels, right? The larger an institution becomes, the more capacity it has to influence decisions. So, speaking of that, let's check out this video. Share my screen. It's a little Mississippi history. It's called Mississippi Justice, an American Experience. Oh, let me remove Buddy.
On June 21st, 1964, 3 civil rights workers were speeding down rural backroads of Neshoba County, Mississippi. Their names were James Chaney, Michael Schwerner, and Andrew Goodman. A black church had recently burned down, and they came to investigate. But now, there were flashing lights behind them. A spy for the state of Mississippi had tipped off the sheriffs that civil rights workers were coming. And the sheriffs were colluding with the Ku Klux Klan. The civil rights workers slowed down the car. Their training said to always stop for police.
For trying to exercise rights, for trying to help others exercise rights, people paid with their lives.
James Chaney was a native of Meridian, Mississippi, who dropped out of high school to join the civil rights movement. Michael Schwerner, a social worker and activist from New York City, moved to Meridian in January 1964. Chaney and Schwerner quickly became friends. Together, they began laying the groundwork for the Mississippi Summer Project, which would bring hundreds of volunteers from colleges across the country to Mississippi to help Black citizens register to vote.
Mississippi public officials viewed it as an invasion. In fact, they called it out loud an invasion. They created statutes.
Hey, you heard them. Mississippi arms for invasion. Dr. Wilson is talking about ownership determines freedom. Ownership determines freedom, right? Communities that own little control little. Ownership creates leverage. Without ownership, communities become consumers rather than decision makers. If you own little, you control little. Think about it. Think about it from an Ocean Springs perspective. Who you think owns the majority of the institutions, the land, the corporations? Who controls Ocean Springs, Mississippi? Look at this article. This is like talking about Meridian, Mississippi, or Mississippi period. They're arming for an invasion because they are in control and they create the narrative.
To basically harass, investigate, jail people who are
bill.
part of the civil rights movement.
Look, Senate bills. Look at this. Look at this. Talking about power, real power. Wilson argues, now listen to this, but think about it from a local level. Wilson argues that globalization allows corporations to operate across national boundaries. Or think about just being in power and being in control allows you to operate in boundaries across all the areas that you control. You control capital, you control production, you control investment, labor. You can move internationally, you can move anywhere you want to. He believes this creates challenges for communities that lack comparable economic institutions, or for people who lack the comparable economic institutions or the economic power or the political power, like the black people in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, or most black people around the United States. And then we're talking about the media and economic power, right? Media ownership matters because it influences which stories receive attention, like this Nolan Wells story. Advertising priorities, public perception, and cultural values. He encourages readers, Dr. Wilson encourages readers to examine who owns major media organizations and how economic incentives may shape content. All right?
And in terms of the Ku Klux Klan, this was kind of their call to war.
The civil rights workers were also targeted by a state intelligence agency called the Mississippi Sovereignty Commission.
See?
The commission was formed in 1956 to combat integration. Under direct control of the governor, the agency treated civil rights activists as agitators who needed to be suppressed.
And now, not to keep stopping, but remember, I have got to get this point. We as black people, you know how we like to say we're not our ancestors? You're right, because we don't really get down like this. But that's because we've been turned to more of a consumer culture than anything, right? So Dr. Wilson criticizes societies that encourage people to define success primarily through consumption. How do black people in America define success? And be honest. How do black people in America define success? Through consumption. We have to have luxury brands. We have to have expensive vehicles. We have to have the white status symbols. Constant consumption without ownership strengthens producers more than consumers. That's why we have nothing, control nothing, own nothing, and are constantly on the defense.
The Sovereignty Commission started spying on Mickey Schwerner and his wife, Rita. Those reports then went from the Sovereignty Commission to the police department in Meridian, Mississippi, about half of whom were members of the Ku Klux Klan. Mickey and Rita Schwerner drove a station wagon. One of the spies, whose name is Agent X, wrote down this license plate number, and it wound up on the list of license plate numbers of civil rights activists.
It was the same blue station wagon that Cheney and Schwerner drove from Mississippi to Ohio on June 16th for Freedom Summer Training.
I don't think any of us were really prepared for what was going on in the state of Mississippi at that time. But little bit of preparedness we had, we did do our best to transfer it to those who were coming down.
It was an effort in a very condensed way to bring home to people the seriousness of the situation and the dangers that they would face.
They're gonna pick you up on the road. They're gonna put trumped up charges on you. You're gonna wind up in jail.
What are you gonna do if somebody pushes you? What are you gonna do if somebody slaps you upside the head? What are you gonna do if you are arrested? And they would have these simulations. That's what the training in Ohio was all about.
And that's cool, but remember, you got to think about from a power standpoint. They were preparing them from a reactionary standpoint, going into an area, coming from areas where they had little power and going to areas where they had even less power. You got to understand who are the owners, who are the financiers, who are the producers, who are the organizers, who are the beneficiaries, the beneficiaries. If you can answer those questions, that lets you know who holds the power and who makes the decision and who controls how you think and behave. Who owns, who finances, who produces, who organizes, and who benefits.
While Cheney and Schwerner were on their way to the training in Ohio, armed Klansmen came looking for Schwerner at Mount Zion Church, a black church outside of Philadelphia, Mississippi. When they didn't find him, they brutally assaulted churchgoers and burned Mount Zion to the ground.
What we know now from the Klan perspective is that burning the church was essentially a setup to bring the civil rights workers there.
The two men were unaware that earlier that spring, state leadership of Mississippi's White Knights of the Ku Klux Klan authorized the murder of Michael Schwerner.
It authorized.
Mickey was a marked person. And he became an extra marked person, not only just because of his, he was Jewish, but because of his effectiveness. And when he began to move into the Neshoba County area, the people there began to really embrace the work that he was doing along with James Cheney.
When word of the attack reached the training, Schwerner and Cheney left to head down to Neshoba County. Andrew Goodman, a new volunteer from New York City and a student at Queens College, joined. An agent for the Sovereignty Commission who had infiltrated the Freedom Summer training reported back that the so-called invasion of civil rights activists was starting.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time the trio reached Mississippi, state authorities, sheriffs, local police, and the Klan were lying in wait.
Economic power is more durable than political power. Wilson argues that presidents, prime ministers, elected officials, they all come, they all go. Corporations, banks, investment firms, financial institutions often remain for decades or even centuries. Political administrations change. Economic institutions frequently continue operating across those changes. And when you have these things instituted within your community and your society, and you can maintain them, you're good. And remember, this does not mean that governments are powerless. The point is that economic institutions often have longer lifespans than elected administrations and therefore can exert sustained influence over public policy and markets. So the government is not powerless. The government is continuing to go because remember, these people are the real engines behind the government. They are truly the government.
On June 21st, Cheney, Schwerner, and Goodman inspected the site of the burned church. A spy in the black community reported their presence to the Neshoba County Sheriff's Office. As they began their drive back to Meridian, they were arrested by Deputy Sheriff Cecil Price. The three were taken to the county jail at about 4 p.m. After holding them past nightfall, Deputy Sheriff Price released them from jail around 10:30 p.m. By then, 2 carloads of Klansmen were in position, watching for the blue station wagon. In coordination with state highway patrolmen waiting nearby, Price got into his squad car and led the Klansmen on a high-speed chase after the civil rights workers.
Price turns his lights on. And the training of the civil rights workers was pull over. Cecil Price put them into his car. They drove to this remote area called Rock Cut Road. Outwayne Roberts grabbed Mickey Schwerner out of the back. Mickey Schwerner by training was a social worker. And so he tried to connect with people. And so he said to him, "Sir, I know how you feel." And Outwayne Roberts shot him right in the chest and killed him. And then grabbed Andy Goodman, shot Andy Goodman in the chest. By this point, James Cheney obviously realizes what's going on. And so he manages to run, from what we can tell, and gets shot by multiple Klansmen.
The killers buried all 3 men 15 feet under an earthen dam and set the blue station wagon on fire.
Missing. Sounds familiar, huh? Sounds familiar, don't it?
This atmosphere of fear was just palpable in Mississippi. There was nothing to rein in this violence. And when you've got law enforcement who are part of that violence, there's no one to protect you.
You hear him, right? You hear him, right?
The state of Mississippi refused to investigate the men's disappearance.
So I have no reason to believe that these people have been killed.
Sound familiar, don't it? Sound familiar? This Paul Johnson, this governor, is saying the same thing that the governor of Mississippi is saying right now. Institutional power. Real institutional power. Economics shapes culture. Wilson argues that advertising, entertainment, fashion, music, and consumer trends are often connected to the broader economic incentives. His point is not that economics explain everything, but that financial interests can influence cultural production and how the culture exists and who gets to actually really be a human. Because we have the power. We have the economics, the political power, the institutional power, the industrial power, the production power, the military power. We have all of that. What power do you people have? But Dr. Wilson says that research creates future power. He places enormous importance on research, like I did with the video a 2 weeks ago when we were talking about the Crimson Report. Wilson places enormous importance on research, science, engineering, technology, innovation. Research, science, technology, engineering, and innovation. He argues future wealth will increasingly come from knowledge. Communities like the Black community, we must build our own economic institutions. Wilson argues that every community seeking greater self-determination should consider strengthening institutions such as investment groups, credit unions, cooperative businesses, educational institutions, research centers, manufacturing enterprises, and media organizations. His emphasis is on creating long-term capacity rather than relying solely on outside institutions or the same people who oppress us to liberate us.
And we don't have any information with the state police that would justify any such conjecture.
Sounds familiar, don't it? Saying the
But
same
there was
thing
widespread
the
media coverage, and the federal government undertook a search. "44 days after they were murdered, the FBI found the trio's bodies.
The governor saying nothing happened, right?
You see, I know what's going to happen. I feel it deep in my heart when they find the people who killed those guys in Neshoba County. You got to come back to the state of Mississippi and have a jury, all their cousins, their aunts, their uncles. And I know what they're going to say, not guilty, because no one saw them pull the trigger.
Federal authorities had evidence and 2 signed confessions, but Mississippi made no move to charge the Klansmen and law officers with murder.
And when they got this evidence, sufficient evidence to bring criminal charges, it was a situation in which either the federal government was going to bring criminal charges or there were going to be no criminal charges.
the FBI arrested 21 Klansmen, charging 19 of them for conspiracy to injure, oppress, threaten, and intimidate the civil rights workers. Only 7 were found guilty in a 2-week federal trial. None of the 7 convicted served more than 6 years.
Do you trust the police? Do you trust courts? Do you trust your state government? Do you trust your federal government? Well, if you've watched people who have committed murder and get away with it, imagine what the answers are.
Where do you turn? Who is it that you can go to say, you know, I am part of we the people. I am part of this Constitution. I am part of this country.
And we've done nothing about it. We've done nothing about it for ourselves. Because remember, the future belongs to organized communities. The future don't belong to people who cry. The future belongs to organized communities. Organization beats individual talent. Communities that plan, invest, educate, research, and cooperate increase their capacity to shape their own future. I'm gonna say that again. Organization beats individual talent. Communities that plan, invest, educate, research, and cooperate increase their capacity to shape their own future. Got to remember. We're dealing with systems of power. And the only way you beat systems is to become organized and create a system that is vastly superior to their system. But we've been lulled to sleep, and that's one of the problems. Black people have been lulled to sleep. Black people in mass don't have that fight in them no more. Black people in mass, or too many black people, have assimilated to white culture. Y'all really think y'all down with these people until something happens, like this Nolan Wells situations. You think you down with them, you think them your people, until they show you that they're not. But history tells us that they're not our people, but we keep forgetting. The assimilation is working. It's worked. You got black people in Ocean Springs who have nothing to do with it, acting like they got something to do with it if that guy's video is true. But that's all I have for today's video, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Chapter 13, Blueprint for Black Power. If you don't have your copy, it's a link in the description for you to get your copy. Remember to like this video, comment, subscribe, share, hype this video. Support this channel. There's a lot of good stuff going on over here. Support this channel. And I'm gonna leave you once again with the brother, with this video, this black brother, and what he's talking about. And it's a sad, sad day to remember how beat down and docile we are as black people. Because once again, if we don't organize and get ourselves together and better protect ourselves, nobody else will. So with that being said, I love you all. Make sure you catch the next video coming up.
See, here's a lot of things that the people in the back of the room don't know. Yes, us locals, we are privy to a lot of things because we know these people. I gave Nolan his first haircut. I know his parents. Been knowing him for years. Been knowing his mom since she was like in high school. I'm real good friends with her family. So here's the deal. When that video came out, and you hear them people on there talking, that lady dug up and went and researched and brought up the sounds. The truth is this. If that video is legit, it's a few people in trouble. Point blank, period. Point blank, period. Now see, this is the stuff that you gotta wait for. This type of evidence, right? Now, I'm gonna help you out here. Alright? I hear Bart and them parents are suing. Bart's name was mentioned on the video. Okay? Well, I asked one of his friends, who was a black guy, about Bart a few days ago. And they said that Bart was cleared already. And according to the black people, they cleared Bart. I don't even know if the police cleared Bart. But it sounds like the black people that's involved cleared Bart. They said Bart ain't had nothing to do with it. But Bart's name is all over that tape. But if these black guys are telling the truth, then guess what? You see why his daddy's suing. And that's what I'm saying, people. You can't just be so quick to just do this type stuff, man. This stuff take time, bro. Investigation. I'm gonna tell you something, man. By the time it's all said and done, half of Ocean Springs might be going to prison, or half of Ocean Springs might be going on a vacation. You don't know yet. So just chill. And like I said, I know these people. I know they family. All right, we all been knowing each other. So ain't nobody on here taking up for nobody. I'm not looking out. I'm not looking out for nobody on here. I'm only speaking what I think is best to be spoken to keep the peace until the facts come out.